talk a little bit about the last week, the things we've learned, and what we have planned for the upcoming week. I'm joined with news editor Tanner Holobar.
Hey, how's it going?
What? Oh, yeah, we're doing that.
Hey, how's it going?
Okay. I'd already forgotten that we sort of did that last time, didn't we? Yeah. News editor Tanner Holobar.
Hey, how's it going, everybody?
City editor Michelle Charles.
Hello.
And reporter Ashlynd Huffman.
Hi.
We wanted to start a little bit on a lighter side, and so we were going to turn to Tanner to talk a little bit about, we know you have usually the events and the goings-ons, but sometimes you're contacted because people know that you write about artists or music or film, so sometimes people reach out to you if they got a new book coming out, so you kind of had someone reach out. Who did you talk to this last week?
I've actually had emails, for a lot of different types of people, people coming into Stillwater to play concerts at the Tumbleweed, like you said, authors, all kinds of things. But recently contacted by a representative of the Oak Ridge Boys. This year marks the 40th anniversary of the song Elvira. So I interviewed Richard Sturban, who is the bass singer, or otherwise known as the Papa Mau Mau part from Elvira.
Yes.
Right.
So yeah, I spoke with him for close to 30 minutes. He was a very nice man. We talked about, gave me all kinds of details about that song itself, basically how, that song, I guess, was originally written. There's a street in East Nashville called Elvira. So a guy named Dallas Frazier saw that street sign, wrote the lyric, "My Heart's on Fire" for Elvira. And then I guess that street itself was really bumpy, so that's where the Papa Mau Mau part. And then he just kind of filled in the gaps later and made it a song about a woman, So it's just kind of, that's one of those things you talk with somebody like that, and I never would have known that, that there's kind of a real world origin for the name of the song, but it's just kind of one of those things you talk with somebody who, you could expect that he has a real deep voice, but I didn't know that going in, and he was, it was like talking to James Earl Jones or, something like that, where it's just a voice that you just don't hear very often, so it makes sense that he's, like basically in a career where he's able to use that, to his advantage, but yeah, they basically knew that song was going to be a hit right away. The first time that they heard it, in the studio, they were all really perking up, saying, "What song is this?" The first time that they, he told me the first time that they played it live, they were playing a concert, I think it was in Sacramento or somewhere out near there in California. And I guess they started adding some of their new songs that were coming up on this album that included Elvira. And they had to do encores of that song in the middle of the show, basically before they had finished the rest of their, set that they had, So, it was a song that right away people were into and were singing along with. So
it's interesting that they knew the song was going to be hit. A few years back, I don't know who all remembers this, I interviewed their manager, Jim Halsey.
That's right.
Yeah, because he
over
was
in Tulsa, right?
Yeah, because it was at that time when they had the Music Hall of Fame there in Muskogee, and a big part of the exhibit side of the Hall of Fame was his collection of memorabilia, which has so much. He has so many these signed guitars from Eric Clapton. All these anybody you can think of. He's got all this insane rock and roll and country memorabilia. But I went to talk to him because we had written sort of an editorial like, hey, maybe Stillwater could have a sort of music Hall of Fame. And so he got a hold of me. He said, "Hey, come check out our stuff." He brought a lot of it back to Tulsa. So I went to his office in Tulsa. But long story short, I guess I was sort of asking him, after all the people he had been through in his career, what it takes to sort of, get to Nashville. How do you determine the people who are going to be, how do you get out of this sort of, because we have a lot of people here who sort of have cult followings, and they have the niche,
yeah.
There are a lot of people, but they don't quite get to Nashville. They don't really go, worldwide or nationwide really. And he said, it's the song. He said, that's...
You just need a really good song to carry you through?
Yeah. He said, it's all about the song. So
wow.
I guess, the popular groups will have a song that sort of connects with a lot of people.
Well, tell me, I mean, anyone who doesn't remember, if nothing else, that chorus, I mean, almost anyone probably heard it because Tanner and I were talking about this the other night when he was, telling me about the interview he was going to do about how this was a big crossover hit for them. It got played everywhere. We were Googling things and we found pictures of them performing it on American Bandstand.
This was because they were primarily like a gospel quartet before sort of getting something
and
mainstream.
They really crossed over.
Yeah.
So, so many people remember that song, Elvira. But the amazing thing to me is, Tanner was, telling me that, this man has been with the Oak Ridge Boys since the 1970s, and they're still making new music. For 50 years, the Oak Ridge Boys are still making music. He talked about a new album, right?
Right, and I actually got a press release today from the same company that I had spoken with about their new album release that'll come out this summer. And that was one thing that Richard kind of talked about was they've actually kind of been out of work for a lot of the last year. He said that, a lot of their a lot of what people kind of know them now for is their Christmas music. At least that's what their most popular stuff is. So they were still able to have a Christmas show this past year. But he said they've basically been out of work for a year, which is, kind of surprising considering this is a group of, such well-known stature, So, but yeah, they're, I don't remember the exact details off the top of my head about their new album specifically, but I believe it's supposed to come out in June. But, that's something that I will definitely include the details in my story that will probably be out by the time this podcast is out. So
fun. Did you have a good time talking to him?
Oh, it was a great interview. He, it was almost like he didn't want it to end. He was very appreciative of us giving the Oak Ridge Boys some publicity, and it was, and I'm sure he even mentioned that he's done a ton of interviews too. So it's not something that's totally new. That's just how genuine they are. I think, just the fact that they're appreciative of, a random newspaper, contacting them, so it's pretty cool.
That is really cool because, these guys are like legends. And then you think about that. And because, we've tried to get interviews before with people and you always kind of have to sell it. Like, they think we're some random little newspaper in a little podunk town. It's like, why should they waste their time on us or something? It's kind of how it feels.
They want to know your reach. And,
exactly.
They want
so
to see how many people are going to be able to read it.
Exactly. So I always have to do this sell job where I'm like, we're part of a chain and we share this content nationwide. And also we're part of the Associated Press. And this could potentially reach many, many more people outside of our market. And I always have to do that. That's how I got an interview with James Marsden, I'm sure. But
we're on the internet. Have you heard of it? Anyone who wants to can read it.
Yeah. We're on the World Wide Web.
All right. That's we look forward to that. Thank you, Tanner.
Yeah, no problem.
Michelle.
Yes.
Everyone loves to read about streets and road and infrastructure.
Man, do they not.
It is
that and restaurants.
It is one of our favorite topics in Stillwater. And now the city is wanting some public input, not specifically about, because the city doesn't have a ton to do with the highways. At least those are, that comes from the Department of Transportation on the state level, but they can gather a lot of input on what to do around the highways. So
exactly.
So what exactly do you think the plans would be for this Highway 51 corridor, 6th Street corridor? What are they calling that?
6th Avenue corridor.
Okay.
Okay, the 6th Avenue corridor, there's a public input they called it a visioning meeting, and I hesitated to use that in the headline or whatever because it's just such a government, I don't know, it's just such a weird kind of thing that they do. They'll have visioning meetings and it just seems goofy to me to use that terminology in a news story. But basically it's a public input meeting. The 6th Avenue corridor, 6th Avenue is also State Highway 51, which is the responsibility of the Oklahoma Department of Transportation. We've seen major improvements to US 177, which is Perkins Road as it goes through Stillwater in recent years. And now Highway 51 is on the ODOT 8-year plan for, I believe, construction to begin in around 2025, last I saw. Anyway, you're right. The city does not have a lot of control over the road itself, and it will be an ODOT project. But whenever we do these joint projects with ODOT, the city of Stillwater is responsible for utilities, for ensuring that utilities are located and moved, and for buying right-of-way along the area for anything they want to do. And the city does have a certain amount of control over what happens along the roadway. And one of the things I really tried to highlight in the story, and that you really see, if you'll just start at Western and drive to Perkins Road on 6th Street and look at the different areas that you're driving through. You've got the area where we have the fast food joints. You've got the area around the hospital and Westwood Elementary and some other medical clinics. You've got, the area right there at the edge that kind of leads to campus, just south of the Westwood neighborhood proper. We actually had a discussion Chris and I had a discussion with someone in a previous podcast about what the neighborhood south of 6th Street, where the kids go to Westwood Elementary is. Is that still Westwood? Is it Westwood South? What is it? Some people consider it to be kind of the same neighborhood, but the fact that it's divided by this busy road makes it feel like a separate neighborhood. And that's really what these big busy roads do, right? Is they divide things and they make it feel like you can't get across, like it's not a cohesive unit anymore. So that's one of the challenges we're looking at. How do you address the different areas of 6th Avenue? By having that busy road, it does kind of impact what develops there and what stays there. And then also, how do you address that concept of connection? How do you connect what lies on the south side of 6th Avenue to what lies on the north side of 6th Avenue, especially when it's something like an elementary school that a lot of kids might be walking to? Or Oklahoma State University. A lot of the college students live south of 6th Avenue. When all that college housing was bought up for the athletic village on the north side of the OSU campus, it pushed a lot of the student rentals south of 6th into that neighborhood. So, I mean, you have young families that live there too. You have faculty from OSU who likes to walk and ride their bikes, to work. So we have a lot of considerations.
So do you think, is there conflict? And I say this because if you remember a few years back when Governor Fallon came here and they were celebrating that Western, Avenue project that they had completed and these things, I get the sense that from people outside of Stillwater who visit Stillwater, what they would really like is the quickest way to get from I-35 to the college. Like if you can make that easy for us, and that's all you need, Stillwater. It's the quickest way to get us in and out of here. But I think that rubs up against the people who actually live here and the people who have different ideas for what they want this part of town to be.
Well, you have so many different considerations when you're talking about the road that goes through your town, one of the major roads that goes through your town. You've got, the business people want the traffic coming by so that they can try to get that business,
Yeah,
right?
They don't want to be bypassed.
You don't want to bypass, but people who just want to get from the south side of town to the north side of town want to bypass. People who don't want to deal with a lot of traffic on that road in the middle of town might also think that some bypass routes would be a great idea. So you have those kinds of things. You have people who think that 6th Avenue should be widened and should have more dedicated turn lanes. You have other people who think, let's do some traffic calming. Maybe they should actually narrow it, because if you build wider roads, you just attract more cars. There is a kind of a mantra in transportation where they say, you create what you build for, basically. So if you build bigger and better roads, more and more cars are going to drive on them. So yeah, there's a lot of tension there as far as what needs to be done there, what needs to happen. And it may not be a cohesive thing. It's not going to be like one big 5-lane superhighway just zooming through town at 50 miles an hour. You've got people, there were some comments on the story last night I saw where someone said, how about just phasing the lights so that you don't have to stop all the time? Well, guess what? When you don't have to stop all the time on a road that goes through the middle of town, you build up speed and people get hit and people get killed and there are more accidents. This is not meant to be a highway where you drive unimpeded at the maximum speed so you can get from point A to point B as quickly as possible. This is meant to be a thoroughfare through our community, But at the same time, you don't want to unnecessarily have traffic backing up. So we got to look at all these things, right? And this is part of the process. The thing is, 2025 sounds like it's a long ways away, but the city of Stillwater is working on its budget for fiscal year 2022 right now. And it's just around the corner. 2025 is in no time. So the time to raise your voice and to express your opinion about what you want our community to look like, because this project is happening. This is the time to get involved. You get involved before it's a done deal. And sometimes you have to get involved like 3 years before it happens in order to have a say. Because if you wait till 2024, it's done, baby.
Right. You want to be on the record right now.
Yes.
Whatever your position is, whatever you'd like to see in that area.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there are lots of opinions. So let's just see what they are. And that's what they're doing right now is they're gathering it. So March 31st at, I believe, 5:30 at the Stillwater Community Center.
Do they have ways to sign up if you're not going to attend in person?
There's always emailing the city council. And I would look on the city's webpage, stillwater.org. And, they've got that Speak Up Stillwater thing where you can provide input on different issues to the city and definitely emailing, the city manager, the city councilors, that definitely gets your input in there.
Okay.
And then just, I'm sure this won't be the end of the discussion. This is just kind of the beginning of it.
Tanner, Ashlynd, any questions for Michelle?
I'm ready.
Probably not.
Okay.
I mean, I guess how quickly would any actual planning start? I mean, are they doing that right now, or are they just kind of starting to take in ideas? I guess where are they at in that process?
I have not talked to the people from ODOT yet, but they would have not have started the engineering yet. I mean, there are so many steps to this, right?
Right,
the city,
of course.
The city has to go through and buy any rights of way for any extra areas. Like if they want to widen things or make an extra wide sidewalk that would accommodate bicycles and get them off the street. If they want to do anything like that, put in signalized crosswalks or whatever, they've got to buy that. They've got to move all these utilities. And one other point with this is that there are a lot of utilities that are buried under this road.
Sure.
That are in this roadway, and they're aging. So if they build us a nice new highway through town, and then in 10 years, those utility lines fail, you have to dig up that nice new road and replace those utility lines and then fix it. And that's an expensive proposition. So what they're looking at is these utilities are going to go ahead and replace them now. Even though they might not be about to fail, they're getting close enough to the end of their useful life that they think there's a benefit to going ahead and spending the money now, getting them out of the roadway, and just clearing everything up.
Okay, thanks a lot. So, Ashlynd, this sort of came up, I think, in just a newsroom conversation. You had mentioned a story about the police or sheriff's deputies or someone, and you mentioned, I think it was police, and you'd mentioned body cameras, and I think I said, what? Since when did Stillwater police have body cameras? Because we'd always been told it was sort of cost prohibitive. It's like, yeah, they would like them, but they can't afford them. So you've kind of found out that, they're trying to get body cameras for people who don't have the dash cams, and the sheriff's deputies, plenty of them also have body-worn cameras. But just what have you learned in the last week?
All the patrol vehicles and the patrol motorcycle police officers, they have dash cams, and the motorcycles have body cams because you can't put dash cams on a motorcycle. I haven't gotten back from Stillwater. They got their body cams for select people, I think, in 2014. Captain Gibbs is trying to push to get body cameras, though, in Stillwater. I met with the undersheriff at Payne County yesterday. They are working on getting body cameras, but they also need a new system, and it's very expensive. They're looking at one from the company WatchGuard, but they're about $500 to $600 a piece, which is cheap. But the only issue is the WatchGuard people have not been getting back with them, and they need battery replacements for a lot of their stuff.
Yeah, cheap relative to other cameras.
Yeah.
Not cheap for you or me to.
Oh, no.
around cameras.
Usual body cameras are like $8,000 a piece. And so he averaged, if they get the expensive one, for about 32 deputies, it would be over $250,000.
And the real expense, they tell you, is data storage. Really.
Yes. So the data storage itself, to get a new server, would be in excess of $120,000. It's a priority for them, but it's if they have enough money left over. They have hired new deputies. And they have to get vehicles for them. They stopped doing the charger vehicles because of if they go out into the grass or something, it's been ripping off car parts. So
they ride too low.
Apparently,
we're too country, I guess, for the chargers.
And so what are they going to buy?
Good question. I forgot what he said.
But like an SUV type thing, or something that rides higher.
I want to say like a Durango, but I don't know if that's right. Is that a car? Okay, no.
Yeah. A Dodge Durango, yeah.
Maybe.
It would be like a SUV kind of thing.
Yeah, so they're looking at that, and so they have to buy new vehicles for the deputies, new uniforms, all of that too. So.
Yeah, full disclosure. Yeah, I had editorialized before how we want as many of our officers as we can get with the body worn cameras. I mean, I would prefer that, but I think in a way I would want them to also have this, not just accountability, but something that would back up all of their encounters. It's not Big Brother spying on you all the time, but, before you make an encounter with a person, you that way you have a record. And I would think that actually probably helps police, I would think, more than it harms them. This came up just this not this last week. The incident actually happened 2 weeks ago when they believe someone was threatening to jump off a parking garage, and
right,
they had that was from a dash cam, but
yes.
it still picked up audio. They had video and audio, and it became part of a larger discussion, but it gave them an example of community policing. So that is why, there was criticism for SPD releasing the video, like maybe it was insensitive, but for them it was also an example of sort of a win, like when you have like a community policing win. Here's an example of us doing the work that you don't see when no one gets hurt, when everybody comes back safe. What was your take on that when you guys first saw that release?
I was headed into court and it popped up on my phone, and I was like, well, we don't usually report on suicide threats or attempts or anything. I wasn't going to do anything, but court was running late and I decided to open it, and I was like, oh crap, they sent it to every media in Oklahoma. Everyone's going to have this, and video and everything. So I texted Michelle and I was like, well, what do you think?
And they'd also posted it to their own
Yeah,
Facebook
they posted
page
it to both their
right.
Facebook and their Twitter. So it was out there.
And when Ashlynd and I started talking about it, it's one of those weird things where, we don't normally report on that. And there are good reasons for that. We don't want to glamorize it. We don't want to trigger someone. We don't want people feeling like this is, a solution to a problem, right? So we always, unless it's something that happens in a very public way where people are going to be, needing to know what happened basically because they saw part of it, we usually don't deal with that. There is, and I'll admit this, we've talked about this, there is this weird feeling of pressure that develops sometimes when you know that other outlets are getting this same material and they're going to be probably running with it. And then you think, should the hometown newspaper be the only one who doesn't have it? And so I'll admit, I kind of responded a little bit to that pressure, even though in my gut I felt kind of weird about the whole thing, because there is a part of it, like with the video, that feels a little bit exploitive, but at the same time, it did demonstrate the police doing some of these things that they're called on to do every day, that goes way beyond just simple law enforcement. This is a lot of what they do in the community. So I felt like there was, something, even though Ashlynd and I both felt kind of weird about it when we talked about it, we decided if we did it from the approach of there's help available, this is how the police helped this young man, and they actually have a whole unit that is dedicated to this, and because this happens so often. So we tried to approach it that way. And when we still you wound up making some changes, and we still took some heat for it. I had a friend who actually commented on my Facebook and said, please take this down. This hurts my heart. This shouldn't be out there.
Right. And the threshold is, public place or a public persona.
Exactly.
Someone in
a public figure.
A public figure, yeah. And this is a case where no, they didn't have the person's name, or they blurred out the face. But if you knew this person, then you would probably know their skin tone and body type, and their height, weight. So you would probably still be able to tell who it was.
Well, and later on, they or their family could go watch that video.
Right, but I mean, so to me, two sort of other big things come out of that. Is that number one, the SPD felt the need, probably because of where we are in sort of where their industry is right now, that they needed to show people that,
that they care.
That our encounters sometimes go like this.
Right.
So it's like they felt, they needed to win or to show a win for police. So like that's one of the discussions. The other discussion, and this is more like in our industry in terms of how we do things, is, like I said, we usually don't cover these things in, is that even the right approach? Are we sort of furthering the stigma when we make it seem like something shameful? Would it be better if we approach this still sensitively, but in a way that these kind of things isn't something to be ashamed of? It just means people need help, and everybody should be able to find help where they can.
I think that's a really good point. I mean, because there's nothing shameful about having a rough time, being in a dark place in your life and needing help. There's definitely nothing shameful about that. I think, it's embarrassing for people sometimes. They don't want to admit it. In our society, we're very much like, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. We're rugged individuals, suck it up kind of society. And I'm sure there's a whole group of young people that are really pretty darn sick and tired of being called snowflakes and told that they're too sensitive. But I agree that, in some way normalizing getting help, I think there's some value there. I think there was some value in showing the police doing something in a way that was sympathetic and really trying to help this person, and also highlighting how much stuff they do that's really not related to law enforcement, that's just crisis management, honestly. So I think there was a lot of value there. I think it was just a question of, how do we deal with it? And I didn't feel great about, honestly, caving to that sense of pressure that, everyone else is going to have it and we're not. It always feels better to do it if I would have thought of all those reasons before I did it, I probably would have felt better about it. I can rationalize it now looking at the whole thing and say there was some value there. But in the moment, I just kind of felt that pressure, and I felt kind of icky about it, to be honest. It felt sort of weird.
Well, the other part of that, journalistically speaking, is it's hard to describe what happened in a video without that video to back it up.
Exactly.
You kind of lose a little bit on transparency there.
Oh, absolutely. Because, they can tell you, and, and honestly, I had pictured something that looked much more dramatic.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So when you see the video, but they were there with him. They could see the little changes in his body language. They could, the tone of voice and the look on his face. And there are all those little things that you pick up from people when you're right next to them. And they've dealt with enough people in crisis that they felt like they could determine that this was a potentially dangerous situation at the very least. At the very least, they needed to get him off that pillar before something happened, whether he really wanted to hurt himself or not. But, it's weird because Ashlynd's been noting how many calls there have been for people to check on people, or of possible attempted suicides or well checks. It feels like it's happened a lot this last couple of weeks. So I don't know if it's end of semester stress that's getting to everybody or what, but it feels like we need to have a really important discussion about stress and mental health and support services in the community and just what we need to be doing about that as a community. I don't know. What did you think about the whole thing, Tanner?
I mean, it is one of those interesting things where you talk about when is it right to report on something like that, you know, I mean, because you never know what the situation the person might be going through or, you know, so there's just all these factors that maybe make it seem kind of weird to put it out there sometimes, but, you know, I do agree that there are times that it's kind of necessary to at least try to explain what's going on. You know, if people see a bunch of police cars anywhere, they're going to be asking questions. So if there's something around a big parking garage, you know, it's one of those things that a lot of people maybe, you know, saw that there was a lot of activity over there. So I think that's kind of the interesting thing where you just kind of, and when the police department put that out themselves, that also is kind of another aspect of it too, because they don't always, you know, put stuff out in that aspect, you know, so, you know, maybe that kind of adds to when it's more appropriate, at least in terms of like, you know, they're putting out the video, they're trying to show that, hey, this was a, you know, I like what you were saying about how they were doing something sympathetic. Maybe that was why they wanted to put that out.
Oh, definitely.
You know,
yeah.
So
that,
I mean,
that was definitely the point of that.
Yeah. So,
right.
I thought it was interesting that it did humanize the officers for me, especially the one officer who, after they got the guy down on the ground, and he said something. There was something about being scared, and the officer said, "I was scared."
Well, it's sort of just a really deep sigh, like right, like
Yeah.
a whew, like
Right.
kind of thing. We saw that from the guy.
Exactly.
So yeah, and that's why I think, like, you know, we do get a lot of things from the, you know, law enforcement perspective. So yes, when we approach stories like this, we definitely want the other perspectives, the mental health, what it's like to go through. I would like to see studies on how they ingest this kind of media, you know, what that does to them. You know, that would something we need to take a longer look at, but definitely is a good example of why the cameras help, I think. You know,
That's true.
even though we've noticed it, people will all watch the same video and come away with, you know, different interpretations of things that we can all see. But it's still, I think, even at a certain expense, I think it's good, you know, for police departments, at least in cities of our size.
I think more transparency is better. I mean, the more you can understand about that's one of the reasons I think it's good that we're talking about this right now, because I think transparency in how we report the news and how we make the decisions that we make helps people understand what we're doing and why we do it. I don't know. I mean, we always default toward, you know, more information is better. So anyway.
Yep. Transparency. Sunshine Week was last week, but for us, it's an ongoing thing.
Every day.
Every day. It's an everyday fight. But that's probably going to do it for us for this week. Thank you for joining us in the newsroom.